Welcome everyone to Beyond the Arc. It is Thursday. Now, normally I start off the show by saying happy Thursday, but it's not a happy Thursday for me. John, Ashley Nicole Moss here, John Gonzalez, and John and our producer Aaron, probably around like 10:30-ish this morning, East Coast time. Get a text message in our group chat from the both of you. And I had not done my morning meditation yet. For people who don't know, I'm very big on meditating. I take like 10, 15 minutes every morning to just center myself. Hadn't
Mhm.
done that yet.
How
And
you
these
feeling?
two
Super centered?
gentlemen, I never centered myself. And these two gentlemen told me that Julius Randle, the breaking news is Julius Randle is officially out for the remainder of the season. Now, before we dive into all of the logistics and fine prints of the matter, how do you feel that you ruined my morning, John?
I want to say that I didn't ruin it. Aaron ruined it. I said my reaction was, "Oh no," and then immediately said we have to start the pod with it. I'm going to put aside, what this means for the Knicks for now and say that I feel terribly for you as your teammate here at Beyond the Arc and CBS Sports, because this is something that we've talked about a lot. You have been very hopeful that he would return to the Knicks and that the Knicks would be able to go on a run. And now, not as much, I suspect.
Yeah, so for people who are unfamiliar of the saga of Julius Randle so far, let me go ahead and give you the cliff notes here. So after 2 months of rehab, with an attempt to go ahead and return to the Knicks, forward Julius Randle will undergo season-ending surgery on his right shoulder. Now, he dislocated that shoulder in a game against the Miami Heat on January 27th at MSG. Now, this is just another reason why Knicks fans and Heat fans will never get along. This just adds to the list of the growing beef between the two of us. Now, Julius, as I mentioned, has just been constantly trying to go ahead and avoid surgery so that he was able to rejoin the team. But sources told ESPN that doctors warned him that his shoulders continued instability made it unsafe for him to play again this season. So obviously, when you hear that word unstable or instability, you don't just think long-term career, you also think quality of life. So surgery at this point really was the only option. But this is a huge blow to the New York Knicks, who are now fifth in the Eastern Conference. The Orlando Magic are above them. When it rains, it pours in New York, apparently. We can
Oh,
never have nice things.
I was thinking that I was going to say, does it feel like you can't have nice things?
It
Because
really does. It really
you
does.
had some awesome things. Yeah. Oh man, you were so excited about
So
this
excited.
team after OG ended up in New York, and
Yeah.
especially at the trade deadline, even when those guys were injured, and we were talking about how smart and savvy the front office was by adding Boyan and Alec Burks, and they didn't have to give up any picks, and the sky's the limit, and the Eastern Conference is wide open aside from the Celtics, and now like what a body blow. I honestly, like, even as a Philadelphian, I don't think I've ever said these words. I feel bad for New Yorkers.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems that like, and again, this was a team that a lot of people, we've had this conversation on the pod so many times, and you have said it very much just verbatim. Look, it's the Boston Celtics, and there's everyone else.
Mhm.
But I do feel like the Knicks, the seeing just how the East has kind of unfolded this season, we're very much in the running to go ahead and make some noise. Maybe they weren't going to be hoisting up a trophy this year, but some people said, listen, they could even give the Boston Celtics a very interesting series if they made it to the conference finals. They could go and get, a nice second round, matchup, whatever the case may be. They could possibly win that second round matchup. So this was a team where the ceiling was a lot higher than I feel like it's been in previous seasons. And there was a lot
Yeah.
of excitement. Julius Randle's having a great season before going out. Jalen Brunson is catching fire. OG, just there was so much to be excited about with this Knicks team. And it just feels like we pissed off the basketball gods because they never allow us to have nice things. And I don't know how to reverse this curse. I just want
Uh,
off the coaster. I want off of it.
I feel like as much animosity as there is between the two fan bases in Philly and New York, I really feel like there's so much similarity
We both know pain.
because yeah, just like endless pain where you're like, oh, I'm going to allow myself to believe again. And then they're like, and then as you mentioned, the basketball gods are like, well, that was dumb. You
Yeah.
shouldn't have done that. Are you a Ted Lasso fan at all?
I love Ted Lasso.
It's
Huge
the
Ted
hope that
Lasso fan.
it's the
Great
hope that
show.
kills you,
Yeah.
right? I mean, that's
It's
it.
it's the hope that kills you. I mean, looking ahead for the remainder of the season, the Kings come to New York tonight, actually, against, the Knicks. They play 7:30.
Mhm.
After that, you have to go ahead and look at their schedule. A lot of winnable games. You have the Bucks, who will dive into all of their issues in just a little bit. There are winnable games on the schedule for the remainder of the season, but obviously the playoffs are a drastically different beast. You start thinking about how much is actually possible without Julius Randle. And right now, the question mark also is still OG. We don't know when he's
Yeah.
going to come back. We haven't heard much about that return. He hasn't played since returning after being out. You heard what Josh Hart kind of alluded to. Like, look, we're approaching this. Like, we're not going to have these guys. And now you're down one and you're waiting for the other shooter drop. It's just, I'm not happy. I'm sad.
Yeah. Josh Hart, we talked about this the other day on the show where he said he'd be pleasantly surprised if those guys came back. What did Josh Hart know and when did he know it? Josh Hart knew.
I
He
told you
knew and
he knew. I told
he
you he
was
knew.
hinting he was hinting at it and everybody was like, what's Josh Hart saying here? Oh man, what a body blow this is. Like
Yeah.
for guys like Josh Hart who have stepped into the starting lineup and like really acquitted themselves nicely, he's been an absolute killer for them. It's just such a bummer for them because like they've been trying to like hold it down while Julius Randle's been out, while OG has been out,
And they've
and
been
they've
doing
done an okay
decent.
job.
And they've
Yeah,
been doing decent. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, they've lost 3 in a row now, but prior to that, they were kind of like, yeah, they were keeping their heads above water. They're still in that 3, 4, 5 mix. And now all of a sudden, like, I wonder what this does for morale too, right? I mean, you lose Randle. He had played Ash. He played all 46 games of the season before he got hurt. He made his 3rd All-Star game. He had a string there where he had 19 straight games with 20 or more points. He looked awesome. And then all of a sudden he was done.
Yeah. And I mean, you talk about morale. Obviously, Julius Randle officially being out is a huge blow to that. And the Knicks losing 3 games in a row so far is a huge blow to the morale that's already may or may not be down low. I mean, Jalen Brunson said we got to figure it out. Like, we can't go ahead and end our season like this. Hopefully, they figure it out against the Kings. It's going to be tough for all that the Kings have going on with their own issues and not being exactly where you thought that they would be this time, based on where they were this time last year. They're still a very good team. They play quick, they play fast. It's just, like I said, it's very sad to be a Knicks fan today. Can't have
Did
nice
you
things ever.
have you talked to other
We're
Knicks
all very
fans?
depressed. Not
Do you have
only
like a
are we
Knicks fan
depressed,
thread?
not only are they depressed, but they want to go ahead and form a mob and attack the AAA arena because they believe that the Heat are 100% out to get Julius Randle. Last injury that Julius Randle had was also sustained in a Miami Heat game.
Yeah. What was that? The ankle injury?
It was the ankle, and it was also
Yeah.
a Heat game injury.
I
Just
mean, he came back from that one though, so he could play
he
in the
did.
postseason last year, which was awesome. And
Yeah.
I know that you guys had that same hope for this year, but the longer this went on and the less news that we got about the updates and he hadn't been cleared yet, and like there started to be rumblings about like, oh, it's getting pretty late here. The postseason's almost upon us. Like, and
Yeah.
then you have as we mentioned, the Josh Hart comments from the other day that got blown up. And I was like, I wonder if the New York media is like taking this a little out of proportion. They weren't. Everybody saw the tea leaves.
They weren't. Listen, I gotta borrow whatever Kyrie, sages, before his games because the energy that he has around him just seems to be perfect. I need some of that in the
Do you
garden. But
sage?
I actually do sage.
What
I need
about
to
like
go sage.
Palo Santo and stuff?
I don't do I have, but I've never actually used it. I'm a big like white sage person. Like, I just sage my
Okay.
space every week. But I gotta take a trip to the garden and just
Yeah, you
sage
do.
the
You
space.
definitely need to.
Something's going on there. Listen, before we dive into the other injuries and concerns around the league, we want to go ahead and remind you guys to like, subscribe, and give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and subscribe to our YouTube channel at some point whenever you get a chance throughout your day. And if it's not Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to your podcast is just fine. Listen, the Knicks are struggling, but it makes me feel a little bit better that we are not alone in this boat because
I,
Kawhi and the Clippers are dealing with some things. And as we know, Kawhi was unexpectedly downgraded to out versus the Kings Tuesday night with right knee soreness. As you said, not a good sign. He went to
Mhm.
LA to deal with his own personal doctor. And then a day before tonight's game against the Denver Nuggets, he was officially ruled out. No Kawhi, no problem, or no Kawhi, big problem?
Oh, no Kawhi, big problem. But I want to say, as you were setting that up, for those of you who are listening on the podcast, allow me to paint a picture. And you can see this, as Ashley mentioned, if you check us out on our YouTube page, which is Beyond the Arc CBS, and you should check it out. It's really great. Ashley does this thing when she's excited about something where it's like, you're familiar with the term jazz hands?
Yeah.
Yeah. Ashley does jazz elbows.
Yeah, it's like my march.
Yeah, you do like a marching thing. It's pretty great. I'm a big fan of it. I think people should check it out. But so, yeah, I think no Kawhi, big problem, right? I mean, because the Clippers with Kawhi on the floor, with PG on the floor, are a good defensive team. You unplug one of those guys, and now all of a sudden you start to see some cracks here. And the Clippers haven't been the same team that they were. Like after they got James Harden and they lost those first 5 games, then all of a sudden they went on a tear from like mid-December to mid-February where they're the best team in the NBA. Since then, not the case. Over this last month, there have been problems. They're 5-5 over their last 10. And one of those problems, and I know that you love to mention this, so you lose Kawhi, right? You would expect, in the absence of Kawhi Leonard, that James Harden would take a step forward. You know who's been real bad lately?
James Harden.
James Harden. So
Shocker.
I went back and looked at this. I didn't realize that this was the case. Ashley, Harden has not hit 20 points in 12 straight games. That is the longest stretch of his career since he played in Oklahoma City. That was 13 years ago. He has gone 13 years without having a dry spell, a scoring dry spell like this. And this is the worst possible time for it. In his last 3 games, he has scored 23 points total. He has 3 threes total in that span. I don't know what's going on with him. It's not good, and it couldn't be at a worse time for them.
Yeah, I mean, this was probably one of my biggest concerns outside of like what we kind of all were talking about when this big 3, if you will, was formulated. We said, okay, it's great in theory, but if we know the Clippers, like we know the Clippers, something will and probably will go wrong. And here we are. Kawhi's dealing with his knee. And then my issue always was, okay, it's not so much a concern about if someone goes down. This is basketball. This happens when you get to this point of the season. Nobody's 100% healthy, but you usually are able to rely on other people to go ahead and pick up the slack. James Harden showed us in Philadelphia when Joel Embiid went down that he's not the guy to go ahead and rely on to do that, at least not consistently. James Harden gave us that one good game in that Philly series and then absolutely disappeared when the 76ers and Joel Embiid needed him the most. This is the exact same story, a different team. And I know they may have had a lot of us fooled when after the All-Star break, they kind of were gelling, or from January to after the All-Star break, rather, they looked really good. And you almost wondered, maybe we were wrong. But on this podcast, especially I kept saying, looks good, but I'm just going to wait a little bit longer. I'm going to hold out hope. I'm going to hold out my accolades for them, if you will, because if I know James Harden like I think I know him, he's going to appear sooner rather than later. And here we are.
Yeah, appear in that he's disappearing. I mean, it's a really bad time for this. I think if you're a Clippers fan, and we make fun about how many there are, but I do have a couple in my life, and I texted with one of them last night when I was like, oh man, what's going on with Kawhi? I guess you just kind of hope that, they sent him home from Sacramento to get treatment on his knee, and now he's out tonight, and they ruled him out, as you mentioned, really early for this. I think you just hope that because it's a back-to-back, that maybe he'll be available tomorrow night, Friday night when they play again, or this weekend when they play again on Sunday. You just got to keep your fingers crossed that he can, at the very least, be ready to go by the playoffs, because no Kawhi, and I would just, close the book on these guys. They're going to be cooked without him. It's a huge bummer, and to a lesser extent than what's going on with the Knicks, because there's so many more Knicks fans, and you guys have been dealing with this forever. But the Clippers are their history here is obviously not great. It's not like they're covered in glory throughout the history of their organization, and this is one of these years where you're maybe the Clippers, but it's such a bummer. I want to see Kawhi out there.
If you want to talk about Bummer begins with B, and so do the Bucks, and they're dealing with some
Nice.
issues right now. All right.
Professional transition. Nice job.
Milwaukee's last two games have resulted in L's, but it's not so much that they've lost. It's exactly who they've lost to. So one of those L's were against the 15-62. Yes, that is the correct record, in case anybody thinks I read that wrong. 15-62 Wizards, L. The 26-50, also a correct record. The Grizzlies, L. But I think the icing on this cake for me, now in the game against the Grizzlies, no Damian Lillard, no Chris Middleton. They still currently are second in the Eastern Conference. But as you pointed out in our group chat, you still have to face the Magic twice, the Knicks, Boston, and OKC down the stretch to close out your season. So it's not like it's
not
an
easy
cakewalk. Yeah. But I think the icing on this Milwaukee cake for me is Doc Rivers. He is the gift that keeps on giving, because instead of looking in a mirror and saying, you know what can I do to help this team be better in these last few games as we approach the playoffs, he's blaming the travel. Listen to this.
I don't know. I think focus. I don't know what it is. It's funny. I've actually been sitting back and watching everything. Not just our players, but our travel crew, everything. And I've made a lot of notes. I will say that. I won't share that. But we don't bring the necessary professionalism, seriousness on the road. And that's something that we can fix. That's something we're going to have to fix.
It's the ball boys' fault, John.
The travel crew. So as the imitable Zoo with Roy, who's a Philly Twitter legend, if you didn't know, now you know, he put this on Twitter. He said he literally threw the bus driver under the bus with that comment, which was really perfect and very apt. And I think, it's the full Doc Rivers experience this season. It really is. It's kind of, Sixers fans were privy to it. We couldn't wait for Doc to hit the bricks. Clippers fans were privy to it. They couldn't wait for Doc Rivers to hit the bricks. And now Bucks fans are dealing with it. And you mentioned those two teams that they lost to. I was trying to figure out which one of those in the back-to-back was a worse loss, because, you didn't have Dame in either of those games. You didn't have Chris Middleton in the one last night against the Grizz, because it was a back-to-back and you want to make sure that Chris Middleton is healthy. So I'm okay with sitting him in that one. But they're both really bad losses. You lose to the Wizards. Corey Crisper cooked them. Absolutely fried them. And then last night,
Corey, I'm not laughing at you, Corey.
No, Corey Crisper's an NBA player, but I think he had 27 points in that game, which is absolutely absurd. There's no way a Bucks team that previously had prided itself on defense should be surrendering that amount of points to Corey Crisper. They've been awful on the road, the Bucks have, all season long. And then they come home and they lose on their own floor to the hospital Grizzlies, who haven't had anybody available all season long. It was Jaren Jackson Jr. and Gigi Jackson last night. And, shouts to Gigi for his glow up this season. But again, that is a decimated Grizzlies team. If I'm the Bucks,
they were at home.
And they were at home, where they generally play better. If I'm the Bucks right now, it's like 12 alarm fire. I'm freaking out.
I think also, you're not only freaking out because of the way that you're playing, but I think that you're freaking out too because, again, for all of maybe what Adrian Griffin was not, he was definitely better at taking accountability for the losses. I mean, I've never heard him in his very short tenure put the blame on anybody other than himself when this team didn't win. And they were playing well under him. For me, if I'm a player on this team, obviously, yes, it's frustrating that we're losing to teams that we should be absolutely annihilating. Yes, it's frustrating that we can't seem down the stretch to have our guys on the court at the same time. And we really need to start really gelling and establishing a chemistry to make a run and to make a push and to live up to expectations. We went through all of this to get Doc Rivers because this was supposed to help us, have a winning season. But then the Doc Rivers factor would annoy the hell out of me. Bro, you're blaming the travel team and the people who come on these away games with us as to why we are losing. We lost at home. Whose fault is that? We didn't have to leave to go any. It is frustrating to be led, because that's what your coach is. He's technically your leader, the captain of the ship, if you will, by someone who takes zero accountability. And that's exactly what Doc Rivers is. It is insane to me.
It's too, you know what? It's a lot to deal with if you're the Bucks. And I think like right now, there's way too much on Giannis. There's way too much on Giannis because ultimately it comes back to him, right? He's the superstar. And when Dame's in and out of the lineup and you can't play Chris Middleton on back-to-backs and you have Doc acting like Doc, like you're asking so much of Giannis. And even last night, he didn't quite look right. There was a couple of times where Doc pulled him and sat him and he was running. He asked the medical staff to take a look at Giannis, and Giannis kept saying, I'm fine. And the medical staff kept saying that he was fine. But after the game, Doc was like, I wish I had just pulled him out earlier because he didn't look right to me. Nothing's going right for them right now. It's ugly.
Listen, our podcast theme today, if you haven't picked up on it, is disarray and chaos. And after this break, it is Top 5 Thursday. So we are going to have a list. John has a list for us, rather, of the top 5 teams most in disarray. We'll be right back.
You came down here to tell us that your date is missing.
I did not get ghosted. I think he was taken.
You were dating as a way to face your divorce. Was I really the only thing holding you together, D?
Damn.
Ready or not,
I am in search of a man with whom I had a beautiful connection.
you can't hide.
If anything feels off, we'll go. Off. Murderer.
Who are you?
Diara.
Diara?
Find you.
Welcome back to the show, everybody. Ashley here, John here. And if you missed the first half of the pod, make sure you rewind, like, subscribe, share with all of your friends. But the theme of today's show is chaos, is sadness, is disarray, and maybe one or maybe all of those emotions at one time. Which leads us to our Top 5 Thursday theme. And that is John's top 5 teams in the most disarray at this point of the season. John, the floor is yours.
Yeah, a lot of teams in disarray, Ashley, as it turns out, as people learned in the beginning of the show here. But it's gonna shock you who made this list. We did a little preview off the top, but we'll start with number 5. And this one's a little unfortunate. As you mentioned, the Kings, they had a great season last year. They're on the come up. And this season, the record is not dissimilar to what it was last year. The difference, however, being that the Western Conference is an absolute juggernaut. There are no weak teams 1 through 10. There are teams with issues. There are teams that maybe haven't played well and for certain parts of the season, or that you could point to, like, with the Phoenix Suns having problems in the fourth quarter, or the New Orleans Pelicans for some reason not being a very good home team, or the Golden State Warriors having fits and starts. But for the most part, they're all really good teams. The Kings are also a good team. They just ran into some really bad luck here, Ash, by losing Malik Monk and Kevin Huerter at the worst possible time. Yeah. Malik Monk looking like he could be 6th man of the year this season, and Kevin Huerter being an integral part of their bench mob. And now a thin team gets thinner. So bummer for the Kings.
Yeah, I feel like for them, the disarray may not be even so much about the season, but the disarray about the future of the Kings, because I feel like the future was so bright, or at least it seemed so bright this time last year. They didn't really do much in the offseason, but then again, because of how well they looked, that wasn't necessarily a big surprise for me. I thought there was a lot to capitalize on, but now it's in some way, shape, or form, it's kind of like, okay, we got to go back to the drawing board, because to your point, the conference is getting better. We're not able to, compete and hang tough with a lot of these teams. We got to figure out how to get better. So it's back to the drawing board, Sacramento. It was fun while it lasted.
I will say credit to the Kings, because they got that Malik Monk news the other day, and it came right after the Kevin Huerter news. And that has to be, when we're talking about morale, that has to be a huge blow. And then they went out and smacked the Clippers around. So good for them. Next team up on my list here, we've got those Cleveland Cavaliers. Oh, man. I mean, we haven't really gotten into the Cavs yet, but last night they did not look good at all against the Suns. They have now dropped 6 of their last 10. And Ashley, you and I talked about this earlier in the week, but Donovan Mitchell came out and he was like, look, not only should you ignore Dan Gilbert saying that I'm definitely signing the extension, but he said to the Cleveland media, he's like, earlier in the season, they asked him, hey, what kind of team can this be? And he said, ask me late in the season and I'll let you know. So they asked him again, and he said, we should have figured it out by now. And they clearly haven't. Like, I was a big fan of that starting lineup of Max Strus, Garland, Donovan Mitchell, Evan Mobley, and Jared Allen. I thought that they had looked pretty good. But then I went and looked at they haven't played a huge sample size together, but just the Cavs as a team, Ash. Post All-Star break, 21st in offense, 25th in defense. There's a reason why Donovan Mitchell is freaking out right now. They are not playing good basketball.
It literally, Donovan's press conferences or interviews rather, these past few days have very much reminded me of that Magic Johnson meme before he left the Lakers as, what was he, the president or like whatever his title was. And he's like shaking his head. Yeah. He's like answering yes, but he's like, I'm not going to be here.
Yeah. I mean, that I actually, just as a quick aside, I was there the day that Magic decided that he was done running the Lakers. And the really amazing part was we were like, hey, well, you know, what did Jeannie Buss say? And, you know, Jeannie's the owner and they're very close. They have been for a very long time. And he goes, oh, I haven't told her yet. And I was like, okay, cool. This is going to go great. All right. Next, that's one of my all-time favorite NBA. All right, let's go to my next one. Talked about the Clippers. Man, worst possible time for the Clippers to go through this right now. Kawhi getting knee treatment. As we mentioned, it's the first night of a back-to-back. He's out tonight. Maybe he plays tomorrow. Fingers crossed that he plays tomorrow. But we said, you know, you're going to need James Harden to step up. And he definitely was not like there to step up. And that's a massive problem. I mean, maybe he snaps out of it. He's gone through shooting slumps in the past, but until Kawhi comes back, it's a two-man show for, you know, Norm Powell has been really good and he's in the 6th man of the year conversation as well. And they've inserted him into the starting lineup absent Kawhi, but you're only going to get so much out of Norm Powell. You traded for James Harden for a reason. It's got to be James Harden and Paul George to carry these guys.
I think also just like kind of the Kings, it's interesting because this Clippers team, so much stock was put into making the tandem, at least of Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, work, right? It's we're going to go ahead and build around them. And now it's building the new dome in Inglewood. And we're going to bring the fans. And we had the Clipper fan wall with all 5 Clippers fans, whatever the case may be. Like, so much stock has been put into making this work. And it seems for some way, shape, or form, whether it's injury, whether it's the wrong pieces, you have James Harden. He's kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out in terms of effort. Paul George, allegedly, we had that report, we had that conversation on the pod. They may or may not be interested in paying him. Philly's willing to swoop in if that's the case. It just seems whatever can go wrong with the creation of this, the recreation rather, or the revival of this Clippers team trying to relive the glory days of the Lob City Clippers, where the Clippers were like a
glory days.
Actually, well, it was when the people actually cared about the Clippers. It was fun to watch.
It's so sad,
them.
though.
It's very
so
sad. It's
they never made
so
it out
far
of the
removed from that. They cannot seem to get it right.
They never made it out of the 2nd round with that group. They were a fun group to watch. I really liked watching them. I really like watching them play basketball, but they also had so many problems. That's so sad that those were the glory days. I think you touched on something there that I think is important. The more that this sort of falls apart, I wonder how much Paul George starts thinking more and more about maybe I do need to go, because this thing with him and Kawhi, you know, that was a very exciting time, right? You're forming a team. We're both going to go to LA. We're going to be the other team in Los Angeles. Isn't this going to be awesome? We're going to be like a challenger in the Western Conference. And they have been at times, but it's been so intermittent. And you were mentioning the basketball gods earlier. They are fickle. They frequently frown upon the Clippers. And I just wonder if at some point PG goes, you know, we gave it our best effort. It would be nice to play in the Intuit Dome. It's going to be a gorgeous building, but Kawhi has had some injury issues. I don't know what James is. Maybe I should just go and get a max contract somewhere else, potentially Philadelphia. But we'll see, right? I don't know. I'm just saying he might think about it. Could be
a conversation that's being had sooner rather than later, seeing how this, you know, experiment, if you will, is kind of unfolding. So
it's a bummer. It's a bummer. Yeah. I was excited for this Clippers group. All right, next team on my list, the Bucks. We don't need to belabor this too much. The Bucks, losers of 4 of their last 5, and you had mentioned that they were playing better under Adrian Griffin, and then they fired Adrian Griffin anyway. I just want to, you know, pull on that thread a little bit. They were 32-14 before Doc got there. They were averaging 124 points per game, which was the 2nd best offensive rating in the NBA. Since Doc, they are a 500 team, 15-15. Their offense is scoring 11 points fewer per game, which drops them to 16th in the NBA. Post All-Star break, they have fixed their defense a little bit. They're up to 12th in defense. So that is credit to Doc. You know, they were awful in transition defense. They're awful at point of attack defense. He has fixed that. But 15-15 speaks for itself. And obviously now the huge problem that they need to figure out is who's checking them into hotels, who's driving the bus,
who's rolling the basketballs, who's folding the towels, filling the water bottles, you know.
Get your act together, Doc Rivers. Get your house in order. They're a disaster, Ash.
Yeah, they're a disaster from so many different angles, just because it's the classic saying, you thought the grass was greener on the other side. Like, you had a coach that you were working well with and may not have been, you know, the most experienced or like the creme de la creme of coaches, but he was getting the job done. And you guys were playing well. You looked well. Yes, defensively, you weren't where you wanted to be, but there was so much room for improvement there. It was still so early in the season. You could have figured that out. You could have brought a defensive mastermind in to maybe help the situation, but you wanted to go ahead and get Doc Rivers because you thought that was the shinier object. And now it turns out it's a dud, because he'd rather blame the water bottle boy versus blaming himself for the failures of this team so far. So
I know that
the water boy.
I know that you're spiritual and you do the sage and all that stuff. Do you think Adrian Griffin is sitting somewhere right now with like a voodoo doll, like a Doc Rivers voodoo doll, and he's just like jabbing it with pins and having a real good time? Like, he's got to love this.
I don't know if it's a voodoo doll, but he may have put some things into the universe, like, go get him.
He has to be enjoying this. All right, last one for you, and I hate to do this to you, but it's obviously the Knicks. This sucks. If you're the Knicks, or in Ashley's case, a Knicks fan, you get the Julius Randle news that now you're still waiting for OG to come back. They were 12-2 with those guys, #1 defense when they played. They looked awesome. They were super fun to watch. There was a stretch there where they won the 9 in a row with Jalen Brunson just like crushing it every night, where I was telling you how much a person who was reared to hate that team, had enjoyed watching Knicks basketball this season. And then it was like, oh yeah, something's got to go wrong. And it has. It's such a bummer.
It's a huge bummer. Obviously I don't need to rehash my sadness, but like I said, we just can't seem to have nice things. And every time we get so close, something happens. And again, I'm not saying that this only happens to us. There are a lot of teams who've experienced this. It's very hard to stay healthy in the NBA, but it just feels like it's kind of like, you know what it is? It's kind of like the Tony Romo era. When I was back in the day as a Dallas Cowboy fan, we had really good teams, and then something would always go wrong that would prevent us from getting to that next level. And then every year it got harder to recreate that magic until eventually we had to start all over again. So like, I'm not even trying to, you know what? I'm not going to talk. I'm not going to put it into the universe. Nope.
You know what? My sympathy for you. I'm trying to be gracious and extend it on the Knicks.
It ended at Cowboys.
I'm drawing the line at the Cowboys. That's
understood. I went
can't do it. I have one. Yes, you did. I have one
it.
question for you. If you could pick a situation right now between the Knicks, the Bucks, and the Cavs, which because they all have their issues, right? Going into the playoffs, you got to pick one that you'd be like, I guess, most optimistic about. Which one would you go with?
Most optimistic?
Yeah, of the teams that we just listed for pessimism reasons.
You know what? I will say, despite how sad I feel, I'm still very optimistic that the Knicks can still compete, because it's still a very good team. If you get an OG is still a question mark. And I think that if you underperform, the expectations for the Knicks were never championship. So if you're able to still go ahead and salvage a playoff season with Julius Randle being out of the mix, it's still kind of sort of a win. Whereas for the Bucks, championship was what it's supposed to be. You have Giannis. Yeah. You have Donovan Mitchell on the Cavs. Like, we don't have that superstar. I know it's an argument that people like to make. We can have that conversation for a different day. But I feel like the standard's a lot higher for the Cavs and the Bucks than it is for the Knicks, unfortunately.
Yeah, producer Aaron points out, and rightly so, that the Bucks have the best player on all three teams by a million miles in Giannis, but I don't know, man. Like, the vibes are so bad with that team. The Knicks took some blows, there's no doubt, but they're plucky. They've been one of those teams this season where you're like, man, it's just, I hate the stupid cliche next man up, but it has been. I mean, we mentioned Josh Hart has been really balling out all season, and I love Dante DiVincenzo.
Yeah.
And can we just
Big
real quick? Big Ragu, can we just shout out real quick? Because we were going to mention this, but we didn't. Last night, Malachi Flynn went for 50 points off the bench. It's only the third time in NBA history that somebody has gone for 50 off the bench. He also had the lowest career points per game scoring average before going for 50. The reason why I bring this up is somebody on Twitter, and I apologize because I don't remember who this was, called Malachi Discount Dante, and I love it. I thought it was amazing.
Oh my gosh, Josh Hart actually tweeted that out too. He said,
"Did he? Oh, nice."
Dante went off, and I was like, "What?" And then I looked it up. Listen, shout out to Discount
Perfect.
Dante. Do your thing,
Discount Dante, do it.
Listen, when we come back after the break, we have some interesting news, some surprising news about Bronny. You don't want to miss that. Hold on tight.
You hear that? It's the heartbeat of American soccer, and this rivalry is gonna get loud. The USL on CBS and streaming live on Paramount+.
Welcome back, everybody. Ashley here, John here, and in the group chat a few days ago, I dropped this tweet that kind of set the internet on fire, social media on fire, rather, and it announced that it is being reported that Bronny James is leaving USC and entering the transfer portal. Now, Aaron said, "I'll believe it when I see it," and I said, "Okay, I'm just dropping it in here." But
Doing
now things have, I'll believe it when I see it. That's my Aaron interpretation. But things have now taken a interesting turn because his dad, LeBron James, actually spoke on the matter. That's his dad, in case you didn't know. LeBron James actually spoke on the matter after a Lakers game. Listen to this.
Well, I don't know where it came from, but at the end of the day, Bronny's his own man, and he has some tough decisions to make. Yeah. And when he's ready to make those decisions, he'll let us all know. But as his family, we will support whatever he does.
It's interesting because he didn't deny it flat out. So there probably is very much truth to this report. It hasn't been confirmed by Bronny yet. Just want to put that out there. LeBron said, "Look, I don't know where that came from, but Bronny's a grown man. He has to make his own decisions. And as his family, we stick beside him." John, this is interesting. I mean, Bronny's USC tenure, very short. Obviously, you know, he was dealing with his health, and luckily he's healthy, thriving, doing much better. But it is interesting because LeBron basically moved to LA to not only pursue other endeavors and decided to join the Lakers for that reason, but also, you know, family, and Bronny going to USC was kind of like the perfect scenario, just very close to one another. It could be maybe Bronny's trying to blaze his own path outside of his dad's shadow.
Yeah, I mean, as I've mentioned to you, have only so much capacity for sports consumption, and like 99% of it is used up on the NBA. So I haven't seen Bronny play. I do know that he, it hasn't gone according to plan in his first season. Right. He hasn't gotten a ton of minutes. I believe that he was coming off the bench, I think. So, right. So maybe he wants to find a better situation. Here's my takeaway from this whole thing. I love LeBron just being a dad there. You know, he could be micromanager, stage mom situation where he's like, I've got issues with the coach. They're not deploying him correctly, whatever. All he's been saying is, I want my kid to be happy and I want him to play where he wants to play. And whatever he decides, I'll be cool with. That's awesome. I mean, like, I don't know. I know that you're close with your family. My dad was a hugely influential part of my life. And one of the lessons he taught me very early in life and always stuck with me, and it sounds really simple, but he was like, you have to be your own man in this world. You have to be your own person in this world. You have to do your own thing. And LeBron is saying exactly that right there for Bronny. I love that. I think it's great.
I think it's interesting too. I was just looking something up regarding the matter, but it's interesting because you would think that somebody this young with just so much writing on his name, his success, his talent, would find the comfort in being close to his family. But then also, and this is, us just assuming, or me rather just assuming, but I think it also is very hard when you're the child of like LeBron James or Michael Jordan or these larger than life people, especially in the world of sports, to just kind of be your own person and enjoy, this era of your life without having that constantly on your shoulder. And it's going to follow him wherever he goes. It's not like he can escape it. The world knows whose son he is. But I think if you sometimes put a little bit of distance, especially when you're not in the same state, in the same city, where it's like your dad is a Laker, like it's not even like he's retired. He's an active player. It's just very hard to kind of escape that shadow. And maybe he just wants to figure out who he is as a person and also as an athlete away from all of that. It probably is very overwhelming. You know what I mean? It's already overwhelming, but like being that close in proximity probably does not make it easier for him.
No, I mean, I can't imagine what it would be like to have. I mean, the college is complicated anyway, right?
Right.
And then on top of that, you're good enough to play Division I basketball. That also comes with its own pressures. And then on top of that, your dad's LeBron. So look, go be a kid, enjoy yourself, find out where you want to play. It's USC wasn't the right fit. That's okay. There's still time.
Let's play one more game of like hypothetical before we close out. Obviously, we know that LeBron desperately wants to play with Bronny. He's made that very, very clear. LeBron's career, he can't play forever, although, you know, it seems a lot of times like he can. He's still just a man. Does Bronny's decision to go elsewhere for college, wherever elsewhere may be, whether it's Ohio State, whether it's Duke, UNC, Miami, wherever, does that dictate at all LeBron's next chapter or his final chapter when it comes to playing with Bronny and where he ends up?
Yeah, I mean, LeBron has a player option for, I forget the number, but it's super inflated for next season. So I think he probably ends up staying next season. The Lakers will have 3 first-round. Yeah, it's $51 million.
51 million.
51 million is a lot of millions. I don't think he's going to pass up on those millions.
That's it.
Especially, yeah. Also because the Lakers do have those 3 first-round draft picks that they can trade in the offseason in order to upgrade the team.
Right.
Bill's been talking and beating the drum a lot on Donovan Mitchell, maybe being that guy. Who knows? Maybe it's Trae Young, somebody of that caliber. And then also Bronny still has to do the transferring, right? So it's not going to he's going to be somewhere else next season. I think you just wait and then figure it out, because I would be shocked if Bronny was in the NBA draft this coming off season. So you have
of course.
If you're LeBron, to just, worry about you playing basketball and then being a dad.
Listen, if Bronny really wants to like just turn the world upside down and just be his own man, he maybe just has to go under an alias, just like a one name, just like, well, he is kind of already one name, just Bronny.
Bronny is kind of a one name.
Bronny is like LeBron. It's just one name, like Prince. You know what I mean? Beyonce, Bronny.
Yeah. By the way, you mentioned Beyonce. The new album is killer.
Do you like it? Do you love it?
Like it. Love it. Are you kidding me?
Love it. Yay. I actually am so excited to hear so many people like this, because I think it just shows like how you may not be like a fan of like, or a diehard fan of like a particular artist, but music is so universal. And like, it's just, I have loved everybody who's like, I love the album. I'm not even a Beyonce fan, but I like it.
I'm a big time Beyonce fan. I thought Lemonade was like,
phenomenal.
Like an unbelievable.
Member,
big time. Big time.
My gosh.
Yeah. Lemonade is like one of the great works of art of my lifetime. It's unbelievable.
Did you watch the visual like on HBO when it came out?
Yeah. Well, that's why when all the, mouth breathing knuckleheads were like, Beyonce can't do country. I was like, did you listen to Lemonade? She did a different genre of song throughout the entire album, including a country song. She can do anything she wants. But yes, it's an unbelievable album.
I'm glad you like it. Did you go to her tour?
I did when I saw her do the Lemonade tour at Dodger Stadium, and it was an incredible effort. Incredible.
John, I had a respect for you, but now I have real respect for you. You know what I mean? It goes basketball respect, Beyonce respect.
Beyonce respect. I saw her and Jay-Z in France. It was incredible.
Nice. On the Run?
Yeah, On the Run. It was
On
so
the Run
fun.
tour. It was a phenomenal one. Aaron, we'll get you in on this convo next time. Listen, for everybody who likes this podcast and all the content that we put out, make sure you guys are following, liking, subscribing, sharing with your friends, your family members, your rivals, whoever it may be. And make sure you guys are tapping in tomorrow, because John and Bill, is Bill back? Is he on vacation?
John, Bill, and Avery Johnson.
Bill, and Avery Johnson will be holding it down. So it's Guys Day Friday. We'll see you then. Bye.